Hello guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video we are continuing with our e-commerce series, and this is going to be the last official episode of this series. So now we are going to store our payments in our cloud firestore database, right? So inside our models folder, the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a payment.dat file, right? So now what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to copy the order model, right? This one here. So I'm just going to copy it up to the first part, right? Okay, so let's just copy it and let's just paste it inside our payment.dat file, because most of the things are going to be similar. So we just need to just make a few changes. We need to just get rid of the order model. Okay, payment, then also here it's supposed to be payment. Okay, let's change it to payment. Okay, so now we need to just get rid of these fields, right? So inside our payment method, what do we need? So we need the transaction ID. So it's going to be required. It's going to be a string of type transaction ID. Transaction ID. The next thing that we need is the amount required. Double, which is of type double, which is going to be amount. Okay. The next thing that we need is the user ID. Require string, the user ID, and then we also need the date time. Which is going to be of type date. Okay, now we also need the payment status, right? String, which is going to be of type status. Okay, so now we need to just change this files to payment, and then payment. All right, so now let's just run flutter pub build runner to make sure that we generate our model of folders using firestore. Okay, now we are done with the models part. Now we need to move on to our services folder, right? So inside our service folder, we need the payment service, which is going to handle creating payment, right? Payment service.dat. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's just create the class payment service. Okay, so we need firebase firestore, and then we also need firebase auth, firebase auth, right? Firebase auth, which is going to be of type firebase auth. Okay, right, and then we need the payment service constructor, right? So we just going to use required firebase firestore, and then we also require firebase auth, auth. Okay. And then firebase auth, which is equal to firebase auth. Right. Okay, so now what the next thing that we need a function for creating our payments or for storing our payments inside our cloud firestore. Okay. So the function is going to be of type future, which is not going to return anything. Okay. So let's just create payment, and then for the parameter, it's going to take in the payment model that we created, right? Okay. So now we are just going to return. All right. So if you don't know about fp.dat, I suggest that you go back to my previous videos so that you don't get lost, right? Okay. All right. So the other thing that I forgot is to create a collection reference, right? We need a collection reference which is going to get data from our payments, right? Payments, which is equal to firestore. Okay, which is just going to return firestore.collection, right? Which is going to be firestore.collection. So we need to just pass in firebase constants.payments like this. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So here let's just import fp.dat. Okay. So for right here, what we are just going to do, we're just going to pass in payments, and then document. Sorry, it's payments.document. The document is going to be payment.transaction ID, right? And then we just need to set the data. So our data is going to be payment.json, right? Payment.json, right? Like this. Okay, now that we have created this, now the next thing that we need to do is we need to move on to create our payment controller, right? We need to create the payment controller. So that's going to handle the logic for our payment. Right, so let's go into our controllers folder. Let's just create the payment controller.dat. Payment controller.dat. Okay. So it's going to be a class of type payment controller, which is going to extend payment. This is going to extend state. This is going to extend state notifier of type bool. Right. So what do we need inside payment controller? So we need the payment service. Okay. Final payment service. And then we need also the reference final ref. Okay. Then required payment service. also require the reference. All right. Okay, so now let's just set the payment service to payment service. And then let's set the reference to the ref, and then super, which is going to be of type false, right? Okay, so we are done with this controller. So now let's take care of our method for creating or saving our payment into Cloud Firestore, right? So create payment. Okay, so it's going to be an async function, right? Okay, so what are we going to take here? We need a build context. Build context, right? Then context is going to be of context. We need to import material that package. Okay, all right, so what do we need? We need also the transaction ID. Yeah, we need the transaction ID. We also need the amount, double amount, and then we also need the user ID, string user ID. Okay, and then we also need the status, string status like this. Okay, all right, so now what are we going to do? Let's say final, right? Payment is equal to payment. Okay, transaction ID is with transaction ID. The date is, we are just going to set this the date time dot now, right? And then for the payment status, we just leave it like that. Okay, now all we need is a response final. Response is equals to payment service dot create a payment, and then we pass in the payment, right? So now we are going to use this response. If you move there, it's of type either. So if you remember from FPDAT, that either gives us an option to either use right or left. In this instance, we are using right if the data that we send to the database has been successfully sent, and then we use left when there is an error, so that should tell us, right? So if there is an error, we need to just show that error. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this bar, and then I'm just going to paste it here. Okay, the same thing for the scaffold here. I'm just going to do the same thing, right? So supposed to be scaffold. Okay, let's here it's supposed to be payment. Okay, all right, so we are done with our payment controller. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to go inside our Stripe payment service. That's where we are going to do all the magic, right? Stripe payment service, right? So if you go into our Stripe payment service, under the display payment sheet, right? That's where we need to do the magic. So the first thing that we just need to grab the current user ID, current user, which is equal to firebase auth dot instance dot current user, right? the next thing that we need to do is okay, so before we move forward, let's go back to our payment controller, right? We need to create a payment controller provider. Payment controller provider, which is goes to state notifier provider, which is going to take in two parameters. It's going to take in the payment controller, and it's going to take in our state type, which is bool. And then here we are just going to return the payment controller, right? The payment service, what we are going to do is reference.watch. So we forgot to create our payment service provider. So here I'm just going to create payment service provider, right? Which is equal to provider, and then it's going to take in a reference, and then it's going to return a payment service like this. Okay, so let's just import the flutter riverpod package, and then for the firestore reference.watch firestore provider. For the firebase auth, we do the same. Reference.watch firebase auth provider like this. Okay. All right. So now we are good to go. Here we just watch reference.watch the payment service provider like this. We are good to go. Right now we are good to go. Okay, so now what we're going to say, reference.watch, let's watch the payment controller provider.notify. Okay, and then create payment, right? Context. So for a transaction ID, if you remember from my video, on my previous video on Stripe, I talked about the payment intent. So the payment intent allows us to access the user's intent, right? Payment intent, so that if the user makes a payment, it allows us to access the user's transaction ID and if that payment was successful or not, right? So here we're going to use a current user .uid like this. We are done. For the payment status, what we need for the payment status, we are going to get it also from the payment intent, right? And then we pass in the status like this. Okay, all right, so now that's it for saving our payments to Cloud Firestore. So now let's just test our application using our emulator, and let's see if everything is working according, right? So let's proceed to payments, right? Let's place an order, right? So this is Apple Pay, so let's just use Apple Pay, right? $19, that's our transaction. Okay, so let's check inside our Cloud Firestore if that payment has been saved. So let me just, okay, so let me pull my browser so that you can see. So as you can see from our Cloud Firestore, we now have payments. As you can see, this one, $19, that's the payment. Now we now have this payment ID. So guys, thank you for watching, and thank you for supporting me throughout this series. So if you want to continue learning more about this e-commerce series, I have another one that I'm creating. That's the admin application, so make sure you watch that one and stay tuned guys for more projects. Thanks you for watching, guys. Cheers.